We truly hope that you are doing well during this lockdown time. We know that a lot of you are trying in many different ways to make it fun and exciting, and we want to say thank you very much for reaching out to us and giving us some awesome suggestions for last week's Toolbox talk. We wanted to say you guys had a lot of fun, a lot of very funny videos coming through, and we want to say how much we appreciate from our side watching you and seeing you guys out there in the industry, some even sending videos of them at work, being an essential service provider. And we want to say thank you to yourselves, especially for being out there and working hard like you do. So once again, very warm welcome to everyone. This is a presentation month that we've actually been waiting for on Legionella. What is Legionella? How does it spread? How can it be prevented? And then finally, we're going to conclude at the end of the month with not only is it preventable, but there are certain things that we can do to be proactive about this type of bacteria. So please, what we are encouraging you, and I know we are speaking to plumbers out there in the industry because it does affect you mainly. In fact, you are going to have a very big impact on the industry from a Legionella point of view in the future, and we're hoping that this will get us started on a new course of action when it comes to mitigating the risks of Legionella, as well as doing monthly, quarterly, and annual inspections on the plumbing that we have installed. So please pay careful attention to this, but we did ask you to let anybody else know. The reason for that is if somebody is trying to save electricity by turning off their geyser during the day, maybe switching it on for a couple of hours in the evening or in the morning, perhaps they're turning the temperature down because this is often the case, and I did it myself a few years ago until I actually learned about this type of bacteria lurking in the geysers or in the actual water system itself, is when we turn that temperature down, we feel that we don't need to put any cold water into it, and it's just at the perfect temperature to have a bath or a shower. And this can become very, very dangerous because of the Legionella bacteria. So we're going to explain to you what it is, and that is the topic for today. What is Legionella? So let us get right into what is the Legionella bacteria. Well, they are found naturally in water and soil all over the world in low numbers. Now, this type of bacteria, the genus of this Legionella, is a pathogenic group of what we call gram-negative bacteria. Now, gram-negative bacteria is found everywhere, virtually all environments of the earth that support life. Now, gram-negative bacteria include what we know as E. coli. So many of you would know what E. coli is. That is a type of gram-negative bacteria. Legionella bacteria is the same species. Now, this includes the Pneumophila or L. pneumophila bacteria. So I know it's technical terms. It is there on your screen. We can send you an extra book on what this is, but in basic terms, this creates a pneumonia-like illness. So it starts off with a very basic flu, and we'll get into that. What is Pontiac Fever? We will explain what is that compared to Legionnaires disease. But basically, this bacteria lives and feeds off the soil and the water in our environment. And it thrives in a certain particular environment, especially when temperatures of water are between 20 to 45 degrees. And we're going to get into that, especially next week when we discuss how it spreads, because really we need to know what the problem is, what is the risk, and how can we stop it from happening. But this Legionella bacteria is responsible for two types of illnesses. Number one, it is the Pontiac fever, and secondly, the very deadly disease is Legionnaires disease, and that is what we are actually trying to explain to many out there in the industry, and particularly you as the plumber, because we really rely on you to give us fresh, clean water, to bring us life into a building and to take death out of a building by removing waste and sewage. And so it is such an important job that you have in ensuring that the water is not only clean and pure, but it is not just clean for drinking, but even on the aerosol side, where these types of bacteria live, that they do not spread into our homes. And perhaps this is something that you might not have seen before, and there are monthly inspections that need to be done. There are quarterly inspections that also need to be done, as well as annual inspections, depending on the type of plumbing that you have installed. Now, this is obviously an opportunity for many plumbers who might not have been in this, and we are going to develop a course in understanding Legionella risk assessment. In other words, the risk management of this type of bacteria, keeping water systems clean. And it's based on your SAN standard as well as your occupational health and safety standards as well. So let us take a look at what is the two different types of illnesses that are attached to this bacteria. For one, Pontiac fever, and the dictionary definition of this is just a mild systematic disease with symptoms that resemble the flu. Now, symptoms will include things like moderate to severe flu, loss of strength, high fever or perhaps chills, muscle pain, headaches, joint pain, diarrhea, difficulty breathing, and a dry cough. Now, you can see very quickly how this is very similar to a type of pandemic that we are currently going through. A lot of this type of symptom is going to be apparent in many of the viruses and illnesses that we currently face. Now, because it is so disguised, many feel that they are getting the flu. And yes, the flu is a different strain almost every year. We don't get the same type of flu every year. The flu itself, there is no cure for it. We only really cure the symptoms or deal with the symptoms until we boost our immune system and we get it mildly, or sometimes we get it more severe, and then it will pass out of our body. Pontiac fever is exactly the same. So perhaps it's being diagnosed as a type of flu, but it may already be prevalent in our environment. How do we know? Well, it's because this type of bacteria is in and around our environment all the time. It is in the soil, it is in the water. And because it shows as a flu-like symptom, it might just be shun off as the flu and not for something that could turn into something more severe. Now, you'll notice that with a flu, if it gets pretty bad, a lot of people start developing pneumonia. Now, Legionnaire's disease does exactly the same, and it comes from the same bacteria. So it starts like a flu-like symptom, and it can become more and more severe. Now, Legionnaire's disease is a type of pneumonia that is caused by this bacteria. So just to give you the definition of pneumonia, this is lung inflammation, which is caused by bacteria or a viral infection. And what this basically does is the air sacs inside our lungs fill with pus, and then they become solid. This type of inflammation will then affect the lung, and that is pneumonia or single pneumonia. If it moves to both lungs, then it's what we call double pneumonia, because it is both lungs that are being affected. So again, it starts off like the flu, and it can lead to something more severe. Now, currently, the statistics that we have are worldwide. They're Europe and America, and quite a number of people are dying because of this type of bacteria. It hasn't been as prevalent before, and we're talking about death cases. The bacteria has always been around, but we do not have a good statistical analysis of the current death rate in the world, or especially in South Africa at the moment. Now, why is that? Well, our lifestyle before was not really giving enough environment to the Legionnaires bacteria or the Legionnaires diseases that were out there in order to continue to grow. We kept our temperature of our geysers pretty hot mostly throughout the day. We switched them on for a lot longer. We also had a lot more control over the types of cleaning that went into water systems. Now, yes, standards and laws have become more stringent today, but the following of those rules and standards are starting to become more and more lax. So we ask, is this type of bacteria then very dangerous? Have we had the hype of join our Legionella program? Have we tried to be bringing as many people to this Toolbox talk to hear about Legionnaire's bacteria for no reason? In other words, we're asking, is it really that serious? Well, some of the symptoms of Legionnaire's disease, as you will see there, is moderate to severe influenza or flu, loss of strength, high fever, muscle pain, renal failure, joint pain, diarrhea, non-productive dry cough. Non-productive means it doesn't provide any phlegm, so it's a dry cough. Basically, it's very similar or exactly like pneumonia from a normal flu. However, this is being spread through a water system. The normal flu is contagious person to person, very much like COVID-19. If you stand or touch or cough near someone with a general flu, like we normally get throughout the year, you could pass it on to the next person. This type of disease is being passed on through our water system. So you can see the danger of both types of diseases. The general flu that we get every year, yes, it is very dangerous, but we get it and we are sort of sorting out the symptoms and we keep ourselves boosted with our immune system. And we just hope that it doesn't get to the point of becoming pneumonia. With the Legionnaire's disease or the Legionella bacteria, this is prevalent in our homes constantly. And what we do is we can allow the optimal conditions for this to continue to grow and put everyone in that household at risk. And we will chat about that a little bit next week as well, on how the actual spread moves from the water system into getting into our lungs. But we ask the question again, is it really dangerous? Do we have some valid points to bring up a subject or a topic like this to really discuss and say that we should be recognizing and making ourselves aware of this type of bacteria? Well, if contracted, the Legionnaire's disease is potentially fatal, with a mortality rate of up to 40%. In fact, in some situations, in a lot more vulnerable situations, it's been seen as a lot higher. As you will see here, the case fatality rate of Legionnaire's disease, depending on the susceptibility, especially in hospital patients, has reached 40 to 80% in some cases, whereas Pontiac fever does not cause any death. So Pontiac fever itself is just a mild flu, but it has the potential to get worse and become a pneumonia-like illness. You'll notice the attack rate, in other words, how it affects you. So when you are exposed to this bacteria, you have a 95% chance of getting Pontiac fever. In other words, you've got a 95% chance of getting flu-like symptoms, with only a 0.1 to 0.4% to 14%, if you're in a hospital, of getting the Legionnaire's disease. Now, this was something interesting, and I'm not going to read too much into it, but in 2006, and this is the European side, so you'll see all the countries there at the bottom, Bulgaria, Romania, all the way down to Italy, Italy being one of the highest cases in 2016 for Legionnaire's disease specifically, not Pontiac fever, but Legionnaire's disease, with multiple fatalities, up to 40 to 80% fatalities out of that number. Now, we've got a case study that we were chatting to a friend who's over in the Netherlands. He was telling us about a case study where they realized in one of the environments where they invited people for a show. It was the tulip show. So they had all these tulips brought in and they made a big fair out of it. People were selling different things. One of the things that was actually being sold on the day were spa baths. So like your little jacuzzi baths, they had their little presentation set up. And in two different halls, one of the halls, the person that set up his jacuzzi was basically just following the rules. They ran off the same water system, but he cleaned it out every day. He didn't heat up the water because it wasn't possible to heat it up at that stage. So he just left it cold, and just to show them how the jacuzzi actually worked. On the other side, well, there you had a real salesman in the other hall. He decided to make a plan and heat up this water. He went a bit further. He took his teenage daughter, I think she was about 18, 19 years old, put her in a bathing suit and put her into that jacuzzi to attract more people into that hall. No doubt, you had a lot more people going into hall number 2 to go and see the warmer water and to see this jacuzzi with a young girl in her bathing suit, obviously trying to attract more sales. The problem is that man made the temperature of the water 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, the perfect growing environment for the Legionnaires bacteria. Now, what happened was 100 cases were found alone just in the people that attended that tulip fair. And when the CDC and the WHO heard about this, they sent a few people out to go and investigate, and they found out that it was because the water wasn't cleaned, it was kept at the optimal temperature, and 100 people developed Legionnaire's disease. So we can really see that the attack rate is increased by the environment. So we're not saying that it's a lot like the flu. You might get it, you might not get it. If you allow the right conditions to grow around you, then the chances of you getting Pontiac fever, even currently, is up to 95%. The chances of that moving over into a very, very fatal Legionnaire's disease becomes a lot more probable as the environment around you constantly hibernates this type of bacteria. So yes, these are statistics from 2016. We've got some more coming out for the South African side, and we are going to be putting that in our next Toolbox talk. So we do invite you to please come back in the next few weeks because we are going to discuss these things. So what are we going to discuss in the next coming weeks? Well, next week we're going to look at how it spreads. The importance of understanding that this bacteria is not only naturally occurring bacteria, but it is present all around us. It's in our homes, it's at our offices, it's in hotels, pools, spas, natural water sources, and it thrives between 20 to 45 degrees Celsius. It will continue to grow if we do not start now with a proper prevention and monitoring solution. Which means if you have at any given time put in plumbing in an environment or changed plumbing in an environment, and you maybe have dead legs or certain areas where water builds up and doesn't go anywhere, in other words, it's stagnated in that environment, this is the perfect breeding ground. If we are setting temperatures too low, or switching off our geysers during a certain time of the day and not allowing it to reach that 50 to 60 degrees Celsius mark, we are allowing Legionnaire or Legionella bacteria to grow with the potential of becoming an illness. Well, is it preventable? Obviously it is. The great news is we need to ensure that certain measures are in place to be proactive. We do not want to be reactive, especially seeing the situation that we are currently facing because of the world pandemic around us. COVID-19 has opened our eyes to a lot of things that we might possibly not have known. But do we learn from the situations that we're in? Well, now's the perfect time to learn from a situation like this. Yes, it might not rapidly spread because of human contact. So it's not going to be passed on from one human. It's not contagious from one person to another. But Legionella can be inhaled or aspirated and then fall into the lungs. But it is preventable. So having a good system of risk assessing, mitigation, monitoring, and controlling the growth of this bacteria is essentially what we want to achieve. So what can you do to start the prevention of this lurking disease? Well, we'll recap at the end of the month on it is preventable. That is our final Toolbox talk for the month of April, where we will recap how you can ensure that the plumbing you have installed, plumbing you are going to install, is monitored and controlled. Put your client on a little bit of a program. Make them aware of how this can grow and the potential results for illness that could come from it. This is a great way to ensure continued compliance of occupational health and hygiene within your area of work. Perhaps you are a facilities manager or a health and safety professional that is signing in today. Did you know about this? Do you know what needs to be done? Well, perhaps reach out to your plumber that is coming to see you, maybe even after the lockdown, and let them get you onto a program of risk assessment, finding out where your risks are, where your end points are, is the temperature that is coming out of the tap the same temperature that is actually being shown on the geysers or the boilers that are in the vicinity of the water area. You see, it might be at such a far distance that by the time it gets to the tap, it has dropped in temperature, and this continued use with the continued growth of the bacteria will constantly aspirate the water, and it will attach to the lungs of those who are using those endpoints. So let us take a look at the next upcoming weeks. We are going to look at how does it spread? Is it preventable? And then finally, we will recap with some good information as well as some templates that we have designed for you already on monthly programs, quarterly inspections, as well as annual maintenance program and plans that need to be implemented as soon as possible. Just again, a reminder of the special announcement due to the COVID-19 or coronavirus pandemic. All courses currently, face-to-face courses, have been postponed until further notice. This is not a cancellation. So please, if you have registered for this course in any one of the provinces, continue to send in your names, because we will continue to have these courses later on in the year as long as it is safe for you and I to attend these courses. Should we decide that we are going to move to a more of an online session, we will discuss that with you, but we also want your feedback. Would you like this course online? If that's a possibility, let us know so that we can also give you, the plumber out there in the industry, the IOPSA members, exactly what you need and deserve. So once again, a very big thank you from us to all of you out there who are still working, those of you who are showing social distancing and staying home and being safe. We appreciate the participation of all. We look forward to seeing you next week, where we discuss how does Legionnaires bacteria spread, and we'll hand it over back to Karim now for any questions.
Thank you for that, Chris. There are a few questions for this morning's session. So the first question is, how does it spread? Do you need to swallow this water, or similar to COVID-19?
So very good question. Thank you very much for that. We are going to discuss that next week. So we do encourage you to please be here for how does it spread. It's not a contagious bacteria like COVID-19. It does come through from water, but the water needs to be aspirated. Basically what that means is it needs to have oxygen and water that creates a little particle, like a shower head will do that, as well as when it comes out of a tap. As soon as it rushes out, it combines with the oxygen and it creates like a little aerosol. And that is what we breathe in and attaches to our lungs. But we will give you a little bit more information on that next week. Thanks, Karim.
Okay, the next question is, so if your geyser is set at 60 degrees and comes on for 4 hours in the morning and then 2 hours early evening, is this a problem?
Thank you very much for that question. A very good question. In fact, that is what one of the things we are going to discuss. The optimal temperature to destroy this bacteria is between 50 and 60 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees being the perfect temperature. But you need to allow your geyser to run for at least 2 hours prior to using it. So you should be fine. If you are using it or switching it on for 4 hours during the day, then the bacteria will be killed in that. Just remember though, if it starts cutting down and you start trying to save electricity more and more, the more you cut it down, the more potential it has to grow. Currently, if you're doing it 4 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, you are not at risk of this bacteria. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is this a risk at swimming in schools that use heated pools?
Definitely, the risk is potentially dangerous for any person with a temperature of water between 20 and 45 degrees Celsius, especially if it is kept at that temperature for a long time. So this bacteria, and if you know how any bacteria works, it's a lot like, if we can use an example, like mold on food. The longer you leave food out, the more mold it will, and every day you will see it becomes more and more moldy, and it starts replicating pretty quickly as soon as the environment allows it to constantly thrive. So a pool, 100%, obviously they are putting in chemicals to kill the bacteria, but it is not always as effective. Good, proper maintenance needs to be done for the water source, as well as the water temperature and where the water is kept, in order to protect yourself against this bacteria. And that is why we are saying to all the plumbers out there, this is an opportunity now to start getting your clients on a regular program of Legionnaires monitoring and control. Thanks, Kareem.
Okay, and then the next question is, in my solar geyser, if we take a shower before water heated to over 45 degrees, can there also be growing Legionella in it?
Definitely. So any single water source where the temperature of water is kept between 20 and 45 degrees Celsius, the Legionnaires bacteria will start growing. And if it has not reached a temperature of over 60 degrees at some point for at least 2 hours, that bacteria will constantly thrive. And especially in a shower head, because the shower head aerates a lot of that water, the steam that is generated from that, as you are breathing it in, some of it will go into your lungs, and you do have a possibility of 90% chance being infected with Pontiac fever, and then that small possibility that it could turn deadly and turn into the pneumonia type fever, which is Legionnaire's disease.
Okay, and then the next question is, what about heat pumps? The water only heats to around 50 degrees. Does this not impose a risk of bacteria growing?
So as we mentioned, 50 degrees is a very good temperature. This is where it starts killing off that bacteria. Could I ask though, if you do have the opportunity to quickly type in this answer, do you keep it at that temperature for more than 2 to 3 hours on your heat pumps? If you can answer that, basically you want to keep it at that temperature for a lot longer period of time. If you can reach 60% or 60 degrees, that is the optimal condition, but anything between 20 and 45 to 50 degrees Celsius, that is where you do not want to be. 50 to 60, you are in the right temperature.
Okay, and then the next question is, the chlorine that municipality put in water, is that not enough to kill it?
So chlorine is pretty good for most bacteria and viruses. It does clean a lot. However, the problem comes in where this type of bacteria sits dormant for a very long time. And the way it actually spreads, and we'll explain this next week again, it creates a little bit of a protective coating around it. If you can imagine a cell in your body that's got like a bit of a protective cell, and once it becomes activated, it starts spreading and growing in that cell. Once it has reached a certain, how can we put it? Once it has reached a certain size, in order to become deadly or more effective to attach to your cells, then it will break out of this and will start attacking a person. So it will protect itself a little bit from the chlorine, especially if the temperature of that water is between 20 and 45 degrees, because it is not as effective in warmer water, chlorine, as it is in cooler water.
Okay, and then the next question is, for the example that you gave during the session, how did all those people get infected? Was it airborne?
So as we mentioned, it is an aerosol type of bacteria. In other words, it lives in water, so it is a waterborne disease. It is attached to water. But as soon as the water becomes aerated, like in a steam or in a mist, you will notice that at a lot of gyms, when you go into a steam room or a misting room, that is where your biggest danger lies. And the reason for that is steam gets inhaled directly into your lungs. Unlike water, where you drink water, you swallow it into your stomach. There, your stomach, basically the acids and the juices in there will kill a lot of bacteria that it brings into the stomach. However, there is a chance of drinking water where you inhale some of the air particles, but it's not a very high chance when drinking water. It is when the water is aspirated. In other words, it's spraying out or there's steam coming off of it. It's those particles. So if you want to say it's aerated, it's not in the air around us unless it is in air particles that are attached to water molecules.
Okay, and then the next question is, how long does the virus take to grow? How long must your geyser be off for it to become a problem?
So it does take time for this to eventually happen. As we mentioned, bacteria takes time to grow, but we do not know the current condition of your piping at the moment. Has it been hot all the time and it's only recently been going down? What we can say is that in recent years, we have noticed the increase in Legionnaire's disease at hospitals. And this is why a lot of people, especially in the CDC and WHO, have started making us a little bit more aware of it, because in the past, this has always been around. Legionella bacteria has always been there. The difference is it's becoming more and more profound and more prevalent now because we are switching off our geysers, we are setting our temperature lower, and the cleaning of our water systems has dropped down. So we cannot tell you that it's been growing for a week to 2 weeks. All we can say is because of our current lifestyle and the environment that we are setting up for it, it is rapidly growing. And that is why we have the need for this type of awareness program.
Okay, and then the next question is, if one needs to get tested for Legionella, can one go to a GP, or is it more complicated than that?
So a GP is going to bring you a test kit, and they're going to say you might have the common flu. Now, as we mentioned, the common flu is a different strain all the time. And influenza, if you actually go and look up what the definition of influenza is just a respiratory virus, a respiratory illness. Basically, it's attaching to your lungs, and it hurts your throat, it hurts your cough. It's a viral infection. So they might be able to diagnose it as Pontiac Fever, but it's very difficult to do that. There's a lot of tests that you've got to go through. However, when you go into hospital for pneumonia-like conditions, in other words, if you currently have an illness that is presenting like pneumonia, the possibility of it being Legionnaire's disease, there is a possibility. The possibility of it just being pneumonia is also a possibility. Currently, it might even be COVID-19. The only way to know is actually going in for the actual blood tests, where they will be able to determine what type of illness you have. If you are not showing signs and symptoms of a pneumonia-like condition, you do not have Legionnaire's disease at the moment. You may just have Pontiac fever, like the common cold. There is no fatality rate for that. However, what we are trying to say is the increase in influenza or flu-like symptoms that we are currently seeing may have a behind-the-scenes bacteria like Legionella, and that has the potential to become far worse than the common flu, especially because of the environment that we are allowing it to grow in at the moment. So please, if you don't have pneumonia-like symptoms at the moment, you are okay.
Okay, and then this is more of a statement to end off the session. Some of the heat pumps, especially the better ones, does go up once a week to kill the Legionnaire's diseases. You will not know it, but it is a built-in function in better heat. Don't know about swimming pool pumps.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is one of the topics that we are going to discuss on the 28th of April, which is it is preventable. So there are some solutions that plumbers have already put in place. And this actually because of the European standards. So a lot of our standards are being taken from the American standards or the European standards or even the likes of Australia. So a lot of the pumps that we are being brought in, or the boilers and the heat pumps, as you mentioned, quite rightly so, they already have this built-in function. There is another type of small tool. It's a thermostatic mixing valve. Basically what that does is as soon as the temperature on the metal starts getting cooler, it allows hot water in. As soon as it gets too hot, it allows cold water in. And these types of things have also been designed to prevent the spread of Legionnaire's disease or the Legionella bacteria. We will discuss that though at the end on the 28th, but thank you very much for that statement. You are 100% correct. We already have these types of preventions in some of the plumbing. But the question is really then to all of you, do you have that in place? And are you making your clients aware that that is there for this reason so that you can continually check and put them on a program of Legionnaire's awareness?